Hello, everybody. This is Allison Smith-Jenks, SVP of Marketing at Freeman. Freeman's the world's leading brand experience company, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this webinar. Today, you'll be hearing from Ken Holsinger, our Head of Data Solutions at Freeman, and Skip Cox, Head of Research and Measurement. Today, we're going to be talking about the groundbreaking Freeman Data Benchmark Study, some of the key research insights, and then you'll learn how you can apply some of these learnings to your program. The study was produced by Chief Marketer and received an unprecedented response from more than 650 brand and event marketing executives from many of the largest companies in the world. And these marketers were from every marketing discipline, from brand marketing to retail marketing to digital, social, direct marketing, shopper, experiential, and more. So at this point, I'd love to have Skip Cox tell us more about this study.
Yeah, thank you, Allie. Just a couple of things before we begin and look at the actual data. First of all, the objectives of the study. Study objectives were straightforward. We wanted to quantify and benchmark the use of data among marketers and looking at marketers across all channels. We also wanted to identify the types of data and metrics that were most valuable to marketers, and probably most important is to understand how marketers are using the data and the analytics, particularly as it relates to making key decisions about their programs. So these were the objectives that sort of directed what we asked about, and I think you'll see we're going to cover most of those as we go through this. So Allie mentioned that we had a broad cross-section of respondents, industries. I think it's a very representative sample and a large enough sample that we could do some segmentation of the results. We're not going to cover all of those in the highlights and insights that we're going to talk about here today, but we're going to be able to at least cover some things. So you'll hear me specifying when we're talking about, let's say, all corporate marketers or senior executive marketers or event marketers versus brand marketers and so forth. I'll point that out. So let's start with a 30,000-foot view of the results. This here is of all corporate marketers, and what we and that would include, of course, by title, cross-section by title, by industry, and so forth. And as you can see, 98% and 97% respectively of corporate marketers are using their data to secure budgets and to communicate with their C-level about their programs. No real surprise here, especially since both are about the same percentage. I think both of those uses of data go hand in hand, and quite frankly, historically, that's been the primary use for data in the past. What did surprise me a little bit was the 89% of corporate marketers who use data to make strategic decisions. This is not something that I would have expected. Yes, over time we've seen that that's become more prevalent, but I wouldn't have guessed it would have been quite this high. Now, if we take a look at all corporate marketers again and how they're actually leveraging this data, we talked about the 89% who are using it to make strategic decisions about their programs, but you've got pretty high percentages that are using it for other reasons as well. If we look at sales-related reasons such as data for corporate databases and CRMs, you see that 76% are using data for this purposes. And related to that, you've got 71% are looking for leads for their sales group. So the others, I think, are much more specific, and I think these are significant percentages as well, with business intelligence, customer experience enhancement, and product development all being over that 70% range. In this particular study, we also wanted to get a sense of how many marketers are investing specifically in data for their marketing programs. And before we look at these percentages that you see here, I first want to position this by saying if we look at all marketers, regardless of company size or type of company, what we found is that 79% today have a budget line item for data. Again, a little bit surprising to me. I think that things have moved quite a bit in the last couple of years based on my experience. And of those who budget, again, all corporations, about 35% are increasing their data budgets, 62% are maintaining them, and 3% are decreasing them. But what's interesting is when we look at this data that you see on this particular slide, when we isolate out just top corporations, so top corporations would be let's say companies that are Fortune 1000 type companies. And presumably these are companies with more resources and expertise to invest in data and analytics. 67% are increasing their budgets for data. 33% are keeping them the same, and none of the respondents said that they're decreasing the budget. So regardless of whether we're talking about leading companies, which we think are important because they tend to lead the way for others, or whether we're talking about the average company, we're seeing significant increases in the percentage of marketing or budgets for data. We're certainly not seeing much in the way of decrease. In these two tables that we're looking at, we've analyzed senior marketing executives. So now we've moved away from all corporate marketers and are talking about senior marketing executive only, who presumably, based on their title, are setting the corporate marketing objectives in the direction for their organizations overall, and that their directors and managers then would be, would need to follow and contribute to. So these are interesting scores, I think, because if you look on the left side, the table that's on the left, you've got primary marketing objectives. You've got the number one objective is to increase sales at 76%. Now, if we compare that to the right side over here, where we look at the most important data metrics that they're using, if you look at the top three, total sales over the product life cycle, total number of qualified leads, sales from partners, platforms, all of these either directly or indirectly relate to the number one or the primary objective that they have of increasing sales. So there's very good alignment there. There is a significant gap, however, when you look at the increasing brand awareness, which is the second primary objective at 67%. There, if we look on the right side for their most important data metrics, only 29% of senior marketing executives are measuring against their second primary objective. So there is a little bit of a gap there. And again, not too much of a surprise to me, just because generally speaking, measuring brand awareness does require more sophisticated measures of doing that, of measuring that awareness. And it's usually something like a brand tracking study, which many companies are not willing to invest in or just don't have the funds to do so. So a little bit of a gap there, but on that number one objective, pretty good, no problems there. Now in this graph, we are comparing the type of data that event marketers collect versus brand marketers. So we've switched gears a little bit here in terms of who we're talking about. So the green bars that you see here represent respondents who are in the event marketing category. The gray represents those who are brand marketers from across various channels. I think probably a couple things here. Overall, what we see here is that event marketers are able to provide more of each of these types of data than the brand marketers. Not surprising, I guess, in some respects, again, two reasons we think this is the case. Number one, brand marketers tend to be siloed, into one or two specific channels, and thus their data needs are much more specific. That's not just a function. It's just a function of the role they play, and not that they're less inclined to measure data. As events, though, looking at the event side of it, as they've evolved over recent years, we've seen that they're much more holistic as a marketing tool in terms of the use of many marketing channels, such as social, such as the web and the press, and they're often trying to achieve a broad array of objectives in shows, unlike some of the more specific or siloed channels. So not too surprising here. To me, what's interesting when you look at these results, though, is when you compare them with the slide that we were looking at previously for the most important metrics of senior marketers. So senior marketers' number one objective was total sales, or excuse me, their number one most important metric was total sales over the product or service life cycle. And 44% of senior execs listed that. As you can see, for that same category there, 39% of event marketers are providing that kind of information, those kinds of data points. So it's good alignment there between what senior marketers are looking for or consider important and what event marketers present. Similarly, for the total number of qualified leads, there it was 39% for senior executives listed that as their most important metric. And as you can see here, 49% for senior market or for the event marketers. So again, good fit there. What's even more interesting to me is that on the brand awareness scores, the event marketers exceed what senior marketers are looking for. 41% of them are collecting brand, information or data that measures against brand awareness. And if you recall, that percentage was only 29% for senior marketers. But all in all, I would say a good fit there between what event marketers are providing and what senior marketers are looking for. Now, it's not to say that brand marketers aren't providing it. If you look at those same scores, they're still fairly significant. But again, being more of a siloed channel of marketing, you wouldn't expect those scores to be quite that high. So overall, I think event marketers, brand marketers are contributing to what senior marketers are looking for, and that's always a good sign. So not only do events provide more data than other channels, event data is being used to inform other marketing strategies and initiatives. And you can see that's 88% here of event marketers use their event marketing data to inform wider marketing strategies and decisions. More specifically, and here's a graph that shows how event data is being used. As you can see here, the data is being used across the marketing mix quite extensively. If you recall the slide that I showed earlier, illustrating how corporate marketers in general are leveraging all types of data for marketing purposes, these percentages for how event data is being used, it's very similar. They're slightly lower, as you can see in some cases. If you recall, all of the scores we showed earlier were around 70%, but we're very close to that. Decision making is at 88% in terms of strategic decision making. That was, I think, 89% for all marketing decisions. So again, supports the fact why data from events is very valuable. So an event, in essence, events are providing, they're like a funnel. They're collecting the type of data marketers need for all of their most important uses and decisions. And not surprisingly, we saw the events collect data across more types than we do other brand marketers. So not out of the question here. So one of the things about events that I think we need to keep in mind and why this is the case, why they provide more data, why they're valuable across multiple decisions, is that you've got many sources of data that are coming from shows. And I kind of alluded to this earlier about shows being more holistic, using more types of channels to produce the events, and as a result, you're getting more data. So you've got registration data that helps define the market. You've got leads, CRM tracking, social, pre and post surveys, website. We can go on and on, session data, press coverage. All of this is information that becomes valuable across the marketing mix. We also, the thing that's interesting about events, and I think it contributes to this, is they're very vertical in nature in most cases. In other words, they serve a very specific market, so it's an opportunity to collect data that helps inform what's going on in marketing for a particular industry or marketplace. Earlier, we showed that 98% of marketers overall use their data to secure budgets. In this graph, we're focusing on just event marketers and how important they consider event data in securing their budgets. Very similar. We're at 98%. If you take the 12% somewhat important, the 44% important, and the 42% that are very important, consider data very important to secure their budgets, that's identical to what we saw for all marketers. So not much difference from that respect. And I think it's important to note that event data is being used beyond simply securing budgets. So we talked about, the importance of that, but they're also using it for other reasons. Now I'm not talking about other marketing decisions, but decisions relating to the event itself, whether we're talking about, selecting the right shows or a portfolio of shows or events to be participating or creating meaningful or targeted experiences for the event, or just even creating the overall event strategy. That data is important too. We're not showing it here in these highlights here, but it's something that we found within the study. Data is being perceived by event marketers as sort of the fuel that powers their event marketing success. Here's an example of it here, and I've got a couple of other slides here in a minute that kind of fall along those same lines. You've got 77% of event marketers believe better data would increase revenue at least 10%. More specifically, if we break that down, you can see here that 77 is pretty evenly split between those who say it's going to be 10 to 20% increase or over 21% increase. That's where the 77% comes from. So this is a perception on the part of marketers and event marketers about how their data can be used. But I think it's at least indicates the positive perception that they do have about the use of data. And similarly, if we look at this next slide here, we've got over half of event marketers believe better data increases audience quality, and that's by over 20%. And again, it breaks down as you see here. So the impact on audience quality is strong, and this is quite significant. We find we have benchmarks. We've been measuring the performance of events for many years, and we've been benchmarking audience and visitor quality, and generally we find quality to be high at events, but there is room for improvement. So if you look at overall buying influence levels, you're running between 81% and 92% of attendees have at least some level of influence. That means either the final say, specify, or recommend. But that drops significantly when we start talking about the percentage who have final say or recommend, or can specify the brand or manufacturer. It's not bad, still very significant when you look at final say ranging from about 20 to 27% in terms of those who have final say depending upon event type, and another 28 to 38% who can specify the brand or manufacturer. Those scores are still quite high. But I think what it indicates is that event marketers feel that they have an opportunity here to grow that quality even more. This is, a landmark study, as we've said before. It establishes the power of marketing data. But having said that, I think there's still a need and an opportunity to create better tools to aggregate the data sources that are available to us, and in using the data to make informed decisions that can optimize success. We need to make it easy too, and that's easier said than done, but we need to make it easier for marketers to use that data. Not everyone is a data scientist, or not everyone is a data analyst. So again, I want to thank you for your time here, and I'd like to now pass the ball to Ken Holsinger, who's Freeman's VP of Data Solutions, and he's going to share with you Freeman's point of view on measurement and the framework that we've developed to leverage the power of data. Ken?
Thanks a lot, Skip. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your insights and your experience in looking at all of this information. It's really helpful to provide such great context. And I'm sure that many of those that are listening are really looking forward to downloading and looking through the report in more detail. But I think one of the things that we have to look at a very high level is that bringing all of this together and understanding the power of what can be done, I would imagine if you're listening to this webinar, you might be wondering, how can I do a better job? You may have come here because you're curious about the statistics, but I think most of us are probably just trying to figure out how we can bring all of this data together and make better decisions for our events and for our marketing budgets. So as we look at that, we're going to just talk a little bit about the construct that Freeman has put together across both products and services to try to answer some of these questions and help all of us make better decisions with our events. As you see on the screen here, we've provided context, as many have, around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to add one component to this, though, that I think is extremely important. We've added Wi-Fi, because who needs air, water, food, and shelter without Wi-Fi? And I guess you could probably argue charging your device would go down there as well. It's not only a humorous look at this, but I think it's a realistic look at how important the power of signal gathering is in what we're doing with interpreting data. And so we have broken down our practice into a similar hierarchy of needs that we call the data hierarchy of needs. And so I'm going to go through and just discuss each of these levels and talk about what we've put together to help unlock value in our data. Starting at the bottom, we believe that it's very important just simply to access and integrate. You might be looking at all of this and saying, well, I have a lot of great data from my CRM or from my registration information or other data points, but they're all in different silos. And so the place where we start is looking at, does a client have full access to their data? Can they connect all of it together to even begin to provide the kind of context that we're talking about to make the kinds of budget decisions or product decisions that have been discussed? So we bring all of that together in a platform we call Fusion that allows us to integrate all of those data services into one place. And so that's where we have to start. How is your data being integrated? Do you have a good structure or APIs that connect the different data signals so that you can provide better context? Once we've got that data pulled together, we now need to know how to act on it. And so that data now needs to be translated into action. How do I make better decisions to provide the right kinds of movement for my team, for my budget, for my vendors? And so we bring all that together in our Quant platform to provide those kinds of insights, benchmark against other industry categories that might be something we want to look at, as well as just frankly looking at our own year-over-year goals and benchmarks that we've set. Really, that's really where we begin to add the services to it. As we begin to expand then what the data can do, we need to deepen the insights. And our research and measurement team, led by Skip and his team, are really the place where we maximize those insights. We're trying to dig in and understand how can we expand the context of what we're looking at. Is there a specific or prescriptive area within our data that we need to look at? Maybe it's sponsors, maybe it's attendance, maybe it's learning. All of those things need to be looked at. And then, of course, with the ever-growing battle over where we place our funds, we need to understand where will we maximize those dollars, where will we solve those prescriptive elements to drive the event or campaign forward. Once we've done that, though, we have a number of clients that are more sophisticated. As we start to reach the top of the pyramid, we're going to try to build a data-driven culture. How do we look at various aspects around all of the decisions we're making 365 to help drive decisions that are based on solid data? If we've brought it together, we've measured it, we've expanded its capabilities, we now begin to evolve into that data-driven culture. And this is probably the area of this pyramid that's the most difficult to look at. This is the area that is really where many corporations stop. Many organizations struggle with really taking it across the line to that data-driven culture aspect to really maximize what's going on. And we have a team that really designs that next step, looks at the very specific needs of an organization and helps champion a campaign or an entire structure around how that data drives their culture. Once we do that, though, there's other clients that just want to explore that data. This is really where data science comes in. We all hear about big data or analyzing this huge amount of signals. We're at a point where getting the signals, the volume of signals isn't the issue. In fact, if anything, we have too much volume of signals coming at us, and it's difficult to make those decisions. And so this really takes us into the area where we can provide more of a competitive benefit to our organization, where we begin to look at the science and say, what drives growth? What drives experience? What drives learning? And so each of these areas are considered. And we have a number of different data studies that we're doing that will evolve this, including the one that you're going to have access to download here that we just finished. So this area of data science really is an area we're very excited about, looking at things like sentiment and facial recognition and environment, and even looking at all of the data surrounding an event like its location, the weather, the crime rates. All these different pieces are involved in various studies that we're doing in the coming months that will provide an exciting level of detail as we explore together the value within the signals that our data provides to us. All of that is brought together into a construct. Obviously, the environment of events that we're focused on here involves, of course, components of the attendee, the exhibitors, and the sponsors. And that ecosystem is extremely important. In fact, as we see sponsorship dollars begin to grow and as traditional brand marketers are beginning to focus their efforts more and more into the experiential, we need to provide context to this data. And so we look at this in three key areas where they overlap. We have ROX, or return on experience. We can't talk about experiential marketing or brand experience without being able to provide measurement. So what do people feel? What do they think as they are going through these events and exploring these spaces that we've provided? We obviously have the traditional financial model we have to look at. What is the return on investment? Where does that brand awareness play in? Where are the sales? How do we drive leads? How do we understand our influence on product as we move it forward? And then the last piece is really looking at return on marketing. How do we measure all of the different marketing aspects? And that's only grown, as Skip mentioned earlier, between social and online and all of the various different platforms that are feeding our marketing. How do we bring all of that together and provide valuable context? And so we hope you'll join us as you download this information, as you look at some of the deeper details in this report, and we look forward to sharing more insights with you as our team continues to branch out into the field that we're looking at with data and provide all of the insights and benchmarks that will help all of us make better decisions.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Skip. We appreciate you taking us through the data report and for uncovering how brands can approach their data strategy. So anyone that wants to see a copy of the report, just go to freeman.com/data-report, and you'll be able to download and be able to ask us any questions from there. Thank you so much. Have a great day.